Happy New Year. I listened to a funny podcast the other night. I don't know if you've heard of it, but Gilbert Gottfried has a regular podcast called Gilbert Gottfried's Amazing Colossal Podcast. It's great. And he was interviewing Dick Cavett the other week. Yes, they're both still alive. Cavett is still very much on point and funny. And he told a little story that reminded me of the days when I was a youth worker. He recently overheard a young person asking the question, "Who's Bob Hope?" which brought him up short. And it reminded me of when I was a youth worker, and I would constantly find my jaw dropping at the things that the young people I was working with had never heard of. Things that were so mainstream as to, you would assume that people would always hear about them. And I think there's an assumption. We think about, Shakespeare from 400 years ago, or however long it was, and we think, well, we still know who Shakespeare is, so the people that are famous now are still going to be familiar to people in 400 years' time. I'm not so sure. Bob Hope, pretty big name, and for somebody from my generation, there's no question who Bob Hope is, because he was on television all the time when I was growing up. And I think one thing that's really changed in the time between is that the kind of stuff that you used to see on television when I was growing up included a lot of content that was in black and white, especially on sort of weekends during the afternoons. There was loads of black and white content on television. That's become really unusual these days. And a lot of younger people, if they see something in black and white, they are immediately turned off. In the same way that a lot of people in my generation were immediately turned off at subtitles, a lot of people in the younger generations just don't have an interest in things from before their time, particularly if they look as different as black and white entertainment does. Now that brings up something that I feel actually pretty strongly about. I don't know if you're my age, you'll probably remember in the mid to late 80s, Ted Turner, who owned WBTS, I believe, was that? No, TBS was the name of the cable channel. They had the rights to this enormous archive of black and white entertainment, a lot of movies, a lot of TV shows, and they wanted to put it on television. But by the mid to late 80s, the audience for black and white entertainment was shrinking, even then. So Ted Turner thought, well, let's colorize it then. Let's take this newfangled computer technology and let's turn these black and white films into color films, because then suddenly there'll be a new audience for them and people will rediscover them. Unfortunately, the technology at the time was very rudimental, and the end product, what they did first is, I think, was It's a Wonderful Life. I think that was the first thing, and it was a big deal. There was a lot of press about it, a lot of attention, and they broadcast it, and it was terrible. I mean, the technology was in its infancy. It was not good. It didn't look good. And critics absolutely slaughtered it. But there was also not just the technology being bad, but just this idea that if something was made in black and white, it should stay in black and white. It was made in black and white for maybe because circumstances required it, but it was made in black and white in a way that suited filming in black and white. Think of Citizen Kane. It's a brilliantly visually brilliant film, but it was made in a certain way because they were shooting in black and white. The use of light and shade was done in a certain way that you would do differently if you were filming in color. So to colorize these old black and white entertainment is just unacceptable. It's artistically invalid and is an assault on what was created by these artists in the time. Now, we don't take that attitude towards, take William Shakespeare. What could be more sacrosanct than Shakespeare? And yet, every day, if you want to, you could find a new interpretation of one of Shakespeare's works, a remix, a mashup, where they've changed things around, placed it in a different time, a different setting. We do accept when art is well established that you can play with it. But for some reason, we don't take that attitude with old black and white films. I think it's fine. I think it's fine to reinterpret. I think it's fine to mix it up and try new twists on things. And it makes me sad that younger generations may miss out on the brilliance of these legends. I mean, just from my point of view, and as much as I love comedy, I think about young people never experiencing the Marx Brothers or Buster Keaton, Chaplin, Mae West, W.C. Fields. There's, the list goes on and on and on. Bob Hope. Of wonderful, wonderful content and brilliant art. That it would be a shame if it's consigned to only academics watching them in another 50 years' time. Because they're black and white and no one else cares. If you're worried about the technology messing this stuff up like they did with It's a Wonderful Life, take a look at the documentary that Peter Jackson put out last year called They Shall Not Grow Old, where they took World War I footage, which, if you've ever seen any of it, everybody moves around at double speed. It's all a bit jerky. They couldn't do any kind of tracking shots because the technology wasn't there. And they've done wonders with this footage. They've stabilized it. They've slowed it down. They've added in the missing frames that they needed when they slowed it down by computer generating them. They've done extensive research into what colors things were, the equipment, the uniforms. And they've painstakingly rejuvenated this archival footage into something that's pretty jaw-dropping, really. So I say, yes, let's dig up all this stuff, colorize it, spruce it up, reintroduce it to a younger generation, and hopefully they will find that they love it so much that they want to check out the original version as well. There's no doubt in my mind that if you did this and did it well, really put some money and time and love into it, that it would work. It would introduce these works to a new audience, and it would increase the number of eyes on their original versions as well. Because people who like them and love them would seek it out, would find it. So, hey, bring back I Love Lucy, do it properly, colorize it, stick it back on television, do the same with the Dick Van Dyke Show, maybe even the Honeymooners. I know a lot of these things have some political issues for the modern sensibility, but I think we're capable of processing them appropriately. Let's give them a chance. I say give it a go. Thanks very much.